Chapter 1: The Binary Nature of the Universe. My focus will be on emission and absorption, and the forces that cause them. I will show that these processes spring from a universe that has a binary foundation involving the physical and non-physical. This new view is meant to guide us in a new direction for explaining natural phenomena. The principles set forth will concentrate on how they relate to human action. Then we will move on to other systems within the natural world to show that they also operate within the same framework. My goal is to show a common ground that will be predictive for all nature. There may be greater clarity if we start with ourselves. Our interest in any subject has its roots in how the world relates to us. It is observable that we spend our lives going from one place to another. Our goal is to reach a different location from where we started. Our ability to do this depends on our success with motion. The human body is a tool for motion that we use to start to reach new locations. Before continuing, it is important to identify the meaning of the term location. We use the physical part of nature to build edifices wherein we can place our own physical structure and other physical objects we have built. Homes, offices, factories, schools, warehouses, restaurants, and all kinds of packaging and storage containers are examples of the locations in which we place ourselves and other objects. Why are we attracted toward moving ourselves and other things into these structures? When we occupy such places, what do we occupy? We commonly think and say that we occupy the physical buildings we have built. When humans lived in caves, we say it was the physical cave they occupied. The physical part of us cannot enter and displace the physical part of other structures. Early in life, we learn the pain of too forceful encounters with other physical objects. Our senses allow us to determine and feel the borders of something, but our tangible parts are not allowed to occupy other tangibles. If a physical cannot occupy another physical, what does the solid part of us occupy when these leaving and entering processes occur? What we actually occupy and displace is the space that is organized and identified by the physical part of these structures. Locations are the organized space we seek to fill through motion. Natural structures are also involved. When we dive into a lake, we think of ourselves as occupying water. But more precisely, our physical body pervades and occupies the space surrounded by water. In a similar way, the building of civilization is an organization of space that we are attracted to fill. The structure of a city represents an array of container technologies. These containers of civilization can be thought of as holes that we both fill and empty. To understand my use of the word hole, we should go beyond the concept of a hole in the ground. The common hole in the ground is seen and identified by the walls of the earth. It is important to extend this concept to all structures. Wherever the physical exists, it identifies and describes the non-physical space next to it. The geometrical borders of the physical gives us the borders and geometrical shape of the non-physical. When we build these containers, we shape and mold the space for the arrival and subsequent departure of ourselves and other objects. The surface of something gives meaning and usefulness to the space of nothing next to it. A table is built to give us the proper space, hole, above it for the placing, occupation of the whole, of objects upon the table. And the non-physical gives identification and geometrical shape of the physical. The physical and the non-physical are each given meaning and identify through each another. See corollary number 2. This means that our physical bodies also organize space that is both internal and external. Why are we attracted to the physical objects we desire? We want to fill the spaces, the holes, that our physical being has created. We fill and occupy the holes formed by our houses and other structures so we can in turn more efficiently fill our own internal and external spaces. We do this in myriad ways. An important part of all houses in the areas that facilitate the filling of our internal spaces with food. Clothing is an example of an external fill. Libraries and computers and reservoirs, filled containers of information that can be used for the internal filling of the mind. We move our bodies for the purpose of having our organized spaces filled with a physical structure of choice. But first, we must fill the areas of other structures to come to our own fill. We are both absorbers and provide absorption for other absorbers, because we are both physical and non-physical. As our physical structure fills the non-physical component of other structures, we have our non-physical component filled by the physical part of their structures. When we move about the world, we fill other structures so that we can be filled. We create an absorbing process for other things so that we can have absorption. To fill and enter is to also be filled and entered. We occupy these containers of civilization so that we can also be occupied. As will be seen, this is the essence of providing value, absorption for something or someone else, in order to receive value, absorption for ourselves. This means that attraction is the physical and non-physical for each other. The organized, non-physical whole wants to be filled, and the organized physical wants to do the filling. This is accomplished through the motion provided by emission. The success of motion is accomplished through absorption, arrival within the parameters of the whole. Our motion is used to filling our external and internal holes with the physical objects of choice. This is the crux of corollary number 3. The universe is a physical filling, absorption, and emptying emission of wholes, non-physical, realized through the development and use of the non-physical by the physical. Our body represents the physical's development and use of the non-physical. All human action is for the arrival and success of filling our spaces. The other side of this is the necessity of emptying our spaces so we can accommodate another fill. A seemingly pregnant question may arise. So what? How can this view tell us anything significant about the natural world of which we were a part? I propose that understanding the role of the non-physical is the missing link in our approach to reality. The problem has been that our attempt to understand reality has always been directed toward the physical part of nature. It is stated repeatedly in scientific literature that the purpose of science and physics is to have physical theory match physical reality. With this unilateral focus on the physical tangibles of nature, we have missed seeing the complete role of non-physical. When we concentrate on the interdependence between the physical and the non-physical, the image of a world of cause and effect having a one-to-one correspondence with reality will begin to emerge. Now there is a really crisis in human knowledge which includes a critical area in science and physics. I have promised you a new view of nature that will integrate our thinking with the world around us. The purpose of this work is to bring us to a new dimension in logic and reason, and to a new and better approximation of reality. At the heart of this view of nature is emission and absorption. The terms emission and absorption refer to physical action. In introducing the scope of non-physical, it can be seen that the physical is only able to exist at some place because it has the non-physical to occupy. These locations, holes of occupation, have meaning and identity because the physical part of structure determines the geometry, shape, and position of these holes. Our house is a whole that we mold and build with the physical walls, roof, and all the internal tangibles within. When we are in residence, we are in state of absorption through the occupation of these specific holes. We can think of ourselves as being absorbed by our residence, container, which is both physical and non-physical. And we, in turn, use the physical home and the physical objects within to absorb our spaces. When we leave our place, whole, of residence, we use the process of emission, which is accomplished by our motion. Motion is the emission stage that allows us to empty this and other organized wholes. The absorption stage is the opposite concept, the fill and entering stage, and it is accomplished through the emission stage. We emit the whole of the container to fill another. We reach toward absorption through the motion of emission. Absorption and emission are a two-stage process. The human goal is to reach the stage of absorption, which is accomplished through emission. One cannot occur with the other. To absorb, we must also emit. To fill, we must also empty. When one hole is occupied, another one becomes unoccupied. This means there is a conservation of holes. Corollary number 7. The physical and non-physical cannot be created or destroyed. Their shape and form will change, but the amount of each will always be conserved. When one whole disappears through absorption, the physical's appearance, another whole appears by emission, the physical's disappearance. A filling of one hole is always accompanied by an emptying of another hole. The importance of this will come later. Our civilization is a series of holes. We build holes for our departure and holes for our arrival. The pathways and highways we build are holes we use for the conveyance of the physical through motion. It takes motion, emission, to reach holes for absorption. Containers are used for absorption and pathways are used for emission. Parallel to our roads, there are emission pipes, holes for water drainage and water access, sewage disposal, and electrical conduction. These conduits have a physical framework for the purpose of building and creating an organized identity for the non-physical. This allows us the medium of nothing, holes, to transport things to us for filling our spaces and to transport things away from us for emptying our spaces. The human body does the same thing. The specialized organs within us contain holes built for filling and emptying the necessary physicals. A city is just an extension of man and his systems. The diverse types of conduits that unify our cities are analogous to the diverse types of conduits that unify our human system. The human body is a series of complex containers, cells, that use pathways, holes, such as veins, arteries, nerves, small and large intestines, lungs, kidneys, and urinary tract, etc. For emission away from, emptying, these cells to prepare for another absorption by filling them again. The underlying nature between both the human body and the human city is the use of the physical to mold and build holes for emptying, emission, and filling absorption the physical. We have external holes such as ears, pupils, mouth, nose, urethra, and rectum that facilitate moving things in and out. Our nerve network exists to transmit stimuli to and from the brain. Absorption for the brain leads to emission from the brain to absorption by the cells that control our muscles. Muscles are then used for the emission of the human body. Notice the domino effect here. Absorption leads to another emission and another absorption, and so on. It is this internal oscillation of the emptying, emission, and the filling, absorption, that allows us to repeat this process with external objects. The fluctuations to fill and empty extend both inward and outward. Our human goals are to reach a fill for ourselves. The emptying stage is preparation for the reoccurrence of the fill. We get things out so we can get things in. The whole must reappear before it disappears by filling. The conclusion is that the viability of a structure, human or otherwise, depends upon its capacity to keep oscillating between the fill and the empty. This can also be referred to as an oscillation. An object with an oscillation of 1 indicates a system designed to be filled and emptied once. Any disposable, such as paper cup, is an example. An object with an oscillation of 1000 indicates a system built to be filled and emptied 1000 times. The more a structure oscillation between the fill and empty, the greater its viability, the longer its life. Corollary number 4. For a structure to have existence, viability, and function, it must continue to oscillate between absorption, fill, and emission, empty. The fill can be thought of as an addition process, and the empty as a subtraction process. When an object is in a filled condition, it is positive addition, and when empty, it is negative subtraction. When we are hungry, we are in a negative condition of emptiness. This emptiness causes an attraction toward the physical food that will provide the positive condition of the fill. The hungry person moves his empty, whole system, a negative, toward food, a positive. There is a natural negative and positive attraction. The hungry negative whole first moves towards the positive food, and then the food moves toward the negative, empty. The negative is the organized whole of nothing, and the positive is the organized something designed to fill a particular hole. Does this have any relationship to the positive and negative charges in electromagnetic phenomena? More on this later. This will be easier to understand using a simple drinking glass as an example. We build a physical drinking glass to form a hole to be filled for the transportation of liquids. To fill a hole in a human structure, we reach for the empty glass because we are attracted to the physical water, and we use motion, emission, to gain our fill, absorption. We have transferred absorption of the glass filled with water to absorption of the human container. These are negative to positive oscillations from one system to another. The driving force for motion is an attraction to fill the empty condition. To reach the fill is to change a negative to a positive. It is important to remember that these two stages occur one after another and are never simultaneous. The common use of opposites, such as positive and negative, fill and empty, arrival and departure, enter and leave, all describe emission and absorption. In each pair, one denotes the beginning of motion, producing the empty, and the other denotes the end of motion, producing the fill. Now let us examine this generalization. All opposites are derived from the physical and non-physical. This is a derivative of corollary number 8, and is the foundation from which all opposites spring. The physical and non-physical are the supreme opposites. It is the opposites that give us the symmetry necessary to better explain how nature functions. The symmetry of natural phenomena is derived from this binary source. I will now show the dependency of the physical and non-physical upon each other. This dependency is extendable to all systems because all systems are a composite of the physical and non-physical. Corollary number 1. I will do this by considering the emission and absorption phases perceived by our 5 senses. The 5 senses that include sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell are not possible and do not exist without their opposite conditions. No sense of sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell. It is necessary to have the empty non-physical condition of not sensing in order to have the filling physical condition of sensing. Experiencing the senses is a positive process that must be experienced through the negative process of not sensing. As nothing is necessary to reach awareness of something, so is the nothing of the empty necessary to reach awareness of the fill. And conversely, a fill is necessary to gain awareness of an empty. The ability to sense something is dependent upon the prior recognition of when we cannot or do not sense something. A profound integrative experience of my life came from the realization that I was able to visualize tangible physical objects only because of the non-physical space that was next to these objects. The borders of something are defined by the borders of nothing next to something. Corollary number 1. Both the physical and the non-physical are mutually dependent upon each other for defining their existence. Corollary number 9. Opposites define each other and cannot stand alone. To know one is to know the other. It also works the other way. We can recognize nothing because it is defined by borders of something. This was a profound revelation to me. All my life, I had been seeing and identifying objects around me, but I had never realized the importance of the nothing that surrounds them. I had never seen stated anywhere the importance of understanding the contrast between the opposites of something and nothing. Is it possible that opposites are necessary for any awareness at all of our surroundings? Is it important to know that the something of stars and planets is only visible against a black background of nothing? This is the frame of reference. Corollary number 2, used for all observations, definitions, and measurements. Why has this not been pointed out? One reason it is never mentioned is because it appears so obvious. But in this case, the obvious is not obvious, and the obscurity of nothing distorts our understanding of reality. The existence of non-physical nothing should be as conscious a part of our thinking process as is the existence of the physical something. It is said that vision is made possible by the transmission of light and the subsequent absorption of photons. But this is only half the explanation of the source of vision. It is the lack of absorption of light alongside its absorption that renders the contrast necessary for the awareness that comes from vision. For visual imaging, it is necessary to absorb light particles alongside not absorbing light particles. White is perceived by us through the reflection of light into the eye, and black is derived from the non-reflection of light into the eye. Where there is all light alone or no light alone, there is blindness. Pilots are as fearful of landing on a field of all snow in daylight as they are on landing on an unlighted field at night. Both fields lack the contrast necessary for the pilot to judge where the surface of the ground is. An all black or all white surface gives us no information. Information lies in the contrast between something, photons, and nothing, no photons. Black for humans represents the nothing of no light, and white represents the something of only light. We receive no light from black because black absorbs light, and we receive light from white because white reflects light. By combining both the something of light and the no light of nothing, we can begin to imagine process. Humans have sight because of binary relationship of photons, light particles, and no photons. A photograph is a mosaic of points of light and no light organized by size and position. A printed page is the same. Color perception is derived from the relationship of light particles and the holes they fill and empty. What we perceive as color is the frequency rate at which photons fill and empty holes. The perception of color is the rate of absorption determined by the frequency rate of alternating nothings and somethings, one after another. The nothings of no light in between and alongside the somethings of light are always necessary to perceive light. No message is necessary to define a message just as a split second of silence is necessary to define a dit or da in a Morse code transmission. Consider the sense of touch. If we touched something constantly, would we feel anything? When we put a ring on our finger, we are immediately aware of it. You might say we have flipped a switch. Switches are on and off devices. The on and off positions identify each other because one is essential to the other. There is no such thing as half a switch. We notice the on of the ring because we feel it against the backdrop of the off. The non-physical off of not sensing a ring is a necessary preparation for the contrast of the physical on of sensing a ring. The off and on opposites of a switch is another example of corollary number 9. Opposites define each other and cannot stand alone. To know one is to know the other. After a while, we no longer notice we are wearing the ring. We have lost the switching sensation. Without the contrast between physical and non-physical, there is no awareness. When we take the ring off our finger, the switch moves from ring on to ring off. This gives us an awareness again of the nothing of no ring instead of the something of the ring. After time, we will no longer notice the ring is off. We need to switch to the off of no touch to perceive the on of touch, as we need to switch to touch to perceive no touch. The one must follow the other to gain sensitivity. These senses work for us because of the oscillations between the non-physical and the physical that can be expressed as off and on, empty and fill, and emission and absorption. Consider the sense of hearing. The on of absorption and the off of emission are provided by the action of sound waves. The waves are composed of a compaction of air molecules alongside a refraction of other molecules. Compaction and rarefaction are dependent upon each other. As always, opposites define each other. Corollary number 9. To compact, absorb, to a filled state requires an accompanying act to rarefy, emit, and reach an emptied state. Rarefy, empty, defines compact, fill, and conversely. Compaction is the crest of the wave and refraction is the throw. When a sound wave comes in contact with the ear, the compaction of the crest is noticeable because of the refraction of the trough on either side of it. Something, more molecules, is defined by the borders of nothing, fewer molecules. We are able to notice the air molecules touching our ears only because, as compacted, there is the something of compaction surrounded by the nothing of refraction. The more of nothing defines the borders of the more of something. If there were all crests or all troughs, there would be no differences, no borders, and no information. This information is transferred by motion to absorption by the brain. Taste and smell convey information by being perceived and not perceived. We sense exclusively trough contrasts. Thus, a strong smell seems to diminish after persisting for a few minutes without interruption. The molecules we interpret as an odor are still there, but their absence is gone, and with it the essential off-to-on contrast. The point of maximum awareness is when the switch is flipped. All human observation, knowledge, and sensitivity is a derivative of these binary physical and non-physical contrasts. In general terms, knowledge of anything requires a prior condition of ignorance from not knowing. The defining process of our senses comes only after our inability to define. Non-awareness is necessary for awareness. The reverse is also true. New knowledge allows us to acquire a new recognition of ignorance and to reach a new non-defining stage. Ignorance is the existence of the holes within the gray matter. Holes are the containers to be filled with knowledge. The empty of ignorance must always be a prior condition before the fill of knowledge. Is the world a series of switches that pulsate between on and off? Is the off and on part phase necessary to achieve and understand the on and together phase? Does nature depend upon physical and non-physical cycles and positive and negative fluctuations for its operation? I am confident the answer is yes. It has been long believed that human awareness comes from the signals and messages of physical objects brought to the mind through our senses. However, the state of not receiving these signals is necessary for their reception. The messages and signals of absorption are determined solely by the borders of their absence. It seems somewhat paradoxical that the area of no message makes the message possible. We are immediately sensitive to where we can achieve emission and absorption because of the oscillating difference between what we receive and what we do not receive. If the absorption of something represents the signal, we can only notice it by not having a signal adjacent to the signal. A message is detectable only when it is surrounded by no message. No message is the necessary complement of a message. Empty is the necessary complement of a fill. Off is the necessary complement of on. Emission is the necessary complement of absorption. It is the nothing of no message beside the something of a message that defines the pathway, zero, for emission and the position of the hole that we use for absorption, arrival. No message gives us awareness of nothing that enables us to use nothing to move, emission, to the message, absorption. This is a key distinction to enlarge our view of natural phenomena and to bring to us a closer approximation of reality. The conclusion is that the frame of reference for all observation lies between the physical and the non-physical. Corollary number 2.